Ukraine wipes out $950 million Russian drone network and Luhansk assault before sunrise. In one morning, Ukraine executed a tri-front operation that stunned analysts and shattered enemy defenses across 3 regions. A single Su-27, flying just 60 feet above the waves, triggered the collapse of Russia's Crimea UAV command network. Hours later, Ukraine crushed a North Korean-backed assault in Luhansk and crippled a major Russian tank plant deep inside Nizhny Tagil. Drones, jets, artillery, and electronic warfare fused into one coordinated strike sequence. To understand how one dawn unraveled an entire chain of enemy operations, the story must begin at the very first moment. Today at 5:47 a.m., a lone Ukrainian Su-27 fighter skimmed just 60 feet above the Skadovsk shoreline, holding a steady 495 knots as the waves fractured into white streaks beneath its nose. No radar locks, no missile tones, only 2 thin threads of smoke rising from the reeds, too narrow for artillery. Within a few hours, that single flight would help collapse Russia's northern Crimea UAV command network, trigger a Ukrainian counteroffensive that broke a North Korean-backed foothold near Luhansk, and support a deep strike on a Russian tank plant near Nizhny Tagil. Operations that Ukrainian and Western analysts later assessed as inflicting more than $950 million in combined losses on Russian and North Korean forces. The Su-27 pilot rolled 25 degrees when suspicious smoke appeared. Not a missile, but a small, silent surveillance drone. The silence was broken by heavy machine gun fire from a concealed shoreline nest. Though inaccurate, the rounds signaled the air defense grid that a fast, low intruder was in the corridor. An inland Soviet-era P-19 radar then caught the low-flying signature, shifting the district to low-altitude interception mode. Russian radio traffic immediately spiked with clipped messages. Drone, missile, or plane, but its low, steady, confident profile demanded action. A lethal Willow 2 man-portable missile then launched from a warehouse roof, aimed at the fighter's prior track. The pilot slammed the throttles, dropping the jet to barely 20 feet above the waves, trading critical altitude for survival. A single misjudged swell at that height meant certain destruction. Russian radio chatter and threat receivers spiked as units scrambled to confirm the target. The coastline was awakening, and every previously silent weapon was now tracking the single low-flying jet. The pilot stole a quick glance down as the Su-27 flashed over the port. The once ordinary warehouse complex had been secretly transformed into a UAV nerve center for the northern Crimea corridor. Rusted roofs now bore improvised antennas and satellite dishes. Alleys were filled with generators and relay boxes. Camouflaged launch rails sat on the ground, and harbor tugboats concealed modular jamming pods, all coordinating strike and reconnaissance drones along the coast. The trap closed immediately. A checkpoint near a crane launched 2 missiles, forcing the pilot into an 8G roll as they narrowly missed. A port gun then fired tracers, pushing him into a prepared kill funnel. Radio chatter confirmed the coordinated tactic. Units to the north blocked retreat. Radars to the east picked up returns, and port defenses to the west closed the final gaps, converging on his shrinking corridor. A second, improved shoulder-fired missile launched from a ship repair hangar, forcing the Su-27 pilot to climb to 180 feet to evade it. This maneuver put him directly into the Russian radar grid. His threat receiver flared with multiple lock-on warnings from coastal, naval, and search radars, transforming scattered fire into coordinated, predatory targeting. A Tunguska gun and missile system hidden among stacked containers opened up, its tracers spiraling toward him and forcing another violent roll that brought the fighter so close to a residential rooftop that laundry snapped in the jet's wake. Yet that forced climb gave him the full picture from above. Every roof, alley, and pier position was integrated into a single, dense UAV relay complex. This was not a simple facility. It was the brainstem of an entire drone operation. At that point, another system powered on, a Pantsir S-2, its tracking radar sweeping in tight arcs from behind stacked shipping crates. Each pass shaved away more of his escape options. The pilot had no choice but to gamble. He armed a UMPK glide bomb, an adapted iron bomb fitted with a Ukrainian guidance maintenance kit and folding wings, and waited for the status indicator to go live. He knew that to release the weapon effectively, he would have to climb into the very altitude band where the Pantsir was most lethal. Then, Russian electronic warfare surged over the spectrum. The GPS constellation on his display began to drop out as jamming intensified, threatening to blind the UMPK's guidance. But this mission carried a backup. Ukrainian engineers had bolted a compact ring laser gyroscope cluster to the pylon, designed to hold guidance drift low enough for a single precision strike. It was crude, limited, and not meant for long operations, but in this narrow window, it was enough. The pilot drove the Su-27 into a steep climb toward 15,000 feet, entering what ground crews call the dead window, where radar can lock most easily. Airspeed bled away. Stall margins narrowed, and the threat receiver screamed as radar beams walked across his tail and belly. He held the climb until the targeting cue blinked green, then released. The glide bomb dropped clear, tumbled once, opened its wings, steadied, and began its silent descent toward the relay hub. Seconds later, a Pantsir missile detonated so close to the fighter that the blast punched a hole in the airflow and damaged hydraulics, lighting the cockpit with caution signals. But the system never achieved a hard lock, and the pilot stayed airborne. Below, the UMPK sliced through the relay hub's roof and detonated deep inside, collapsing the UAV control center into a cloud of dust and twisted steel. Across the northern Crimea corridor, Russian-controlled drone traffic went almost completely dark. The building was gone. The network it fed had been effectively unplugged. As the Su-27 escaped at low altitude, Russian shore guns desperately fired tracers. It broke through the fire and vanished over the horizon. On the ground, smoke covered waterfront areas. Russian firefighters aided a shocked Ukrainian dock worker. Ukrainian civil defense teams warned families across the estuary about debris and dust. Near the port road, a Russian family gave water to Ukrainian truck drivers who had sheltered nearby. Children on both sides were moved away from the lingering haze to protect their lungs. The tactical goal was met, but the civilian consequences were immediate. At 3:46 a.m., near the fog-shrouded perimeter of a Luhansk military base, Ukrainian radar detected a new threat from the north. Moments later, North Korean forces cooperating with Russia launched a coordinated strike. 9 short-range ballistic missiles and more than 40 heavy artillery shells slammed into drone hubs and fuel depots around the city. It was not a warning salvo. It was a preemptive attempt to blind Ukraine's drone network and fracture its strike coordination before a planned offensive. Ukraine responded under heavy jamming. Bayraktar TB2 drones lifted from forward positions south of Luhansk, flying just above the tree line to avoid clean radar locks. They transmitted only brief, encrypted bursts of data, slipping under jamming thresholds to pass targeting coordinates. On the ground, BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles advanced through muddy defensive lines, their anti-tank teams focusing on North Korean artillery units as they reloaded. BM-21 Grad rocket launchers rippled salvos across approach routes to disrupt follow-on reinforcements. North Korea deployed unmanned ground vehicles and armed four-legged robots, using thermal sensors to probe trenches and ruins. With drones and digital links compromised, both sides resorted to close-quarters combat. To seize the initiative, Ukrainian commanders launched an armored counterattack from the industrial area. T-64 tanks advanced in a double pincer, striking the North Korean flank. MiG-29 fighters provided low air cover for Mi-8 helicopters, which ferried small teams armed with manpads to establish a mobile air defense network along wooded ridgelines. North Korean T-55 tanks attempting to retake the rail corridor faced RPG fire from ruined buildings, forcing them to maneuver and exposing them to new threats. The tide turned when French Caesar howitzers, firing from over 20 miles away, executed precise strikes. These strikes destroyed hardened gun nests and command posts, disrupting North Korean radio coordination and breaching their front line. By morning, the counterstrike had reorganized the Luhansk battlefield, destroying or disabling an estimated $400 million worth of North Korean artillery, armor, and support vehicles, leaving their spearhead heavily damaged and disorganized. The airspace then turned into a layered drone battlefield. Ukrainian commanders launched waves of reconnaissance and attack drones in stacked formations to flush out hidden KN-06 air defense batteries. Decoy drones generated false radar returns. Strike drones dove on any launch signature they detected. North Korean Su-25 attack jets scrambled to intercept, but dispersed Ukrainian missile teams operating from tree lines and ruins forced them back with hits and near misses. With air defenses degraded, Ukrainian BMP-1S delivered assault teams to the hardened bunker ring around the Luhansk stronghold. Shtugna P missile crews targeted blast doors and reinforced corners, while armed robots and UGVs inside the bunkers fought room to room with suppressive fire. Overhead, drones mapped ventilation shafts and escape corridors, feeding coordinates to Grad batteries that turned those routes into choke points. Underground shelters that had seemed impregnable began to crack, smoke pouring from shattered hatches. A North Korean relief convoy advancing south toward Luhansk was ambushed and destroyed by Ukrainian forces. Reconnaissance detected the armored column, which was then targeted by a drone swarm as it entered a narrow rail corridor, disabling the lead vehicles. Bayraktars guided Caesar howitzers to crater escape routes, while anti-tank teams blocked side roads. Within hours, the relief column was annihilated, isolating the Luhansk garrison. Ukrainian T-64S and BMP-2S then advanced from 3 axes, clearing streets and buildings, while reconnaissance drones marked any renewed resistance for artillery. Wounded North Korean soldiers were disarmed and evacuated under guard, as Ukrainian commanders emphasized the need to preserve life where possible. By late morning, the Ukrainian flag flew over the shattered radar tower that had once guided strikes into the region. The forward operating base that North Korea had built inside eastern Ukraine was no longer operational. Above Nizhny Tagil, an integrated air and missile strike crippled a major Russian tank plant. Su-25S flew low, with MiG-29S providing air cover and jamming. Neptune cruise missiles hit transformer yards and command nodes, while Uragan rockets knocked out power feeds. Specialized drones degraded thermal imaging. HIMARS precision rocket fire countered Russian batteries. By 5 a.m., the plant's command grid was wrecked, radar failing, and reinforcement coordination hampered by jamming. This multi-layered attack destroyed key power, control, and air defense assets at a secure armored production hub, worsening Russia's equipment shortfall. Across operations from Skadovsk to Luhansk and Nizhny Tagil, Ukraine employed a mature, multi-domain doctrine combining drones, legacy jets, precision artillery, improvised guidance, and electronic warfare. This campaign inflicted close to $1 billion in losses: aircraft, armor, artillery, drone hubs, and industrial infrastructure on Russian and North Korean units, silencing key command nodes coordinating strikes against Ukraine. Despite the heavy fighting, moments of humanity persisted. Firefighters aiding civilians, soldiers bandaging opponents, and families helping one another to safety. As technology increasingly dominates combat, the central question remains: will the growing power of cheap precision weapons hasten an end to the conflict, or merely increase the cost for civilians? Share your thoughts below.